What is the Schomburg Center? To me, it is home. The place where we come to see who we really are, not just somebody else's reflection of who we are.
The Schomburg Center is a place of culture. It's a place of history. It's a place of knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is a repository of all of the things that has documented our sense of worth as a people.
For me, that means that it is a place of immense power.
The Schomburg Center is a public research library and a cultural institution
for the study of the Pan-African world.
It is perhaps the best in the world.
My Schomburg Center is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg.
Arturo Schomburg said, Black history and culture and intellect exists at a time when most people didn't believe that. He collected those evidences, and that became the beginning of the collection.
And it has expanded and has grown to where it is now a world-class institution.
It holds over 10 million items.
There's no parallel anywhere that brings to light what we as people of color have done, what we continue to do.
Black culture is all of culture. The universals that animate everyone's life happen here for all people.
The Schomburg for me is one of the center pillars of Harlem. When I started the journey of finding out about Red Rooster and Harlem, the very first place I went to was the Schomburg.
Researchers from around the world come and use what we have here.
I could not have written just about any of the books that I've written without the Schomburg Center's archives, resources.
The Schomburg Center is much more than a library. We encourage lifelong learning and exploration.
The Junior Scholars Program is a Saturday program with students from 5th grade to senior year in high school to help them learn about Black history and culture.
Learning about my history is important because it teaches me who I am.
The Schomburg Junior Scholars Program is going to do nothing but uplift them.
So many talented and brilliant people have walked the corridors of this amazing institution over the years. From Octavia Butler to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Alvin Ailey, and Harry Belafonte, who graced the stage in this room of the American Negro Theater.
This place evokes great memories. It was a gift to us in our community to really try to find that space to reflect expressions of Black experience. I just knew that the environment and what I saw these young African Americans doing was a place I needed to be.
What is my Schomburg Center? I'm standing here at the Cosmogram, which underneath holds the ashes of the poet Langston Hughes. On the evening when this Cosmogram was dedicated, people began to empty out of the auditorium. A jazz trio struck up, and to my amazement, Amira Baraka went over and asked Maya Angelou for a dance. And they started to dance on top of the Cosmogram, on top of the ashes of Langston Hughes, and I felt what a fitting way to kiss the memory of Langston.
The Schomburg Center is a research institute and a library, but it's so much more than that.
There's something going on every day.
So many amazing people come here to talk about their creative craft, to share what inspires them. The Schomburg Center's collections help to tell stories even beyond our walls.
The Schomburg Center is here in this exhibition at MoMA, One-Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series. We depend on the resources of the Schomburg to enable us to tell this story. Thinking about the implications of the past on the present is absolutely crucial for understanding the next steps, understanding what we have to do to go forward.
We today have the responsibility of making sure that new artists and activists, new scholars, this place continues to be a resource and a source of inspiration for the work that we must continue to do.
The Schomburg Center is knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is education.
The Schomburg Center is home, it is family, it is foundational.
The Schomburg Center is inspiration.
The Schomburg is with me in everything that I do.
Community, inside and out.
The Schomburg Center is us.
The Schomburg Center is you, and we invite each and every one of you to find your Schomburg Center.
Good evening, good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, where we are dedicated to the collection, preservation, and interpretation of the global Black experience, and also where every month is Black History Month. My name is Novella Ford, and I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibitions here at the Schomburg Center. I know on a night like tonight, New Yorkers in rain, we decide to sort of huddle down in our homes, and you could have been anywhere. But you, like me, are excited by the formidable Bethann Hardison. So I thank you for joining us for tonight's Heritage featuring Bethann Hardison in conversation with Harriette Cole. This program is presented in partnership with DREAMLEAPERS. And DREAMLEAPERS was founded or launched in 2016 by Harriette Cole as an inspiration. DREAMLEAPERS, which is a multi-pronged engagement designed to help people access and activate their dreams. You'll hear more from Harriette Cole about DREAMLEAPERS in a while. Heritage is also dedicated here at the Schomburg Center to our living legends who carry significant parts of our culture, and we are able to present these through these almost like oral histories. The Schomburg Center is filled with many of these stories, so if this is your first time at the Schomburg Center, I hope it certainly will not be your last. We are halfway through our winter 2018 season. Next month, we will celebrate Women's History Month with a celebration of women in jazz every Monday in the month of March. We have harpist Brandy Younger and pianist Courtney Bryan, who will be celebrating the music of Alice Coltrane. We'll also have a talk about Abby Lincoln and a small performance by Liz Wright. We have the mighty, mighty saxophonist Faustina Dixon and more. I invite you to pick up the brochure in the lobby. It has Lorraine Hansberry on the cover. Also, for the most up-to-date programming, visit the Schomburg Center's website at schomburgcenter.org, also on Eventbrite, where many of you may have RSVP'd for tonight's program. I'm going to ask you to silence your cell phones. Also, no recording of tonight's program. It will be live streamed. And also, we're going to have a Q&A following the conversation. We have mics at the back of the room on each side, and we're going to ask you to use them. We do tape all of our programs for archival purposes, so if you don't use the mic, you will not be part of the recording. And it's so imperative that you are part of the conversations that we have here at the Schomburg Center. And last but not least, certainly no flash photography, but if you certainly do, make sure you tag us at Schomburg Live or Schomburg Center. Y'all know how it goes. I could go on and on about Bethann Hardison, but I'll leave that to the conversation that we will have. But a few years ago, I had the chance to present Bethann, or to have her honored with the Frederick Douglass Award by the New York Urban League. And I thought it was so important to recognize Bethann for all of the work that she had been doing within the fashion industry. I believe that there's any place that we want to be, any place where Black people want to be, is exactly where they should be. And so to have freedom fighters in those realms, making sure that we are being supported, that we are getting the best of what we have to offer, I thought was worth recognizing. So when I went out and I asked people like Emil Wilbekin and others, how can I reach Bethann Hardison? Somebody please introduce me. Their eyes would light up. They'd give me that look like, you know, she's kind of like my auntie, right? And it's so true. She is so warm and so welcoming and so hardcore and so about her business, and so about you being about yours, and I absolutely adore that about her, and so I'm so glad that we get a chance to have her in conversation here at the Schomburg Center tonight. Harriette Cole will take us through the conversation and tell you more, like I mentioned, about DREAMLEAPERS. So let me just give you a little bit about Harriette Cole. She's a lifestylist and branding coach who has devoted her career to supporting people as they build their dreams. For 20 years, she has coached entertainers, entrepreneurs, and business professionals to present their brands effectively. For 15 years, Cole has written the nationally syndicated advice column, Sense and Sensitivity. She has penned 7 books, including best-selling Jumping the Broom, The African American Wedding Planner, How to Be, Choosing Truth, and 108 Stitches, Words to Live By. Cole executive produces and hosts a weekly video series, The Root Live, Bring It to the Table, presented by Prudential. Harriette has been a contributor to the Today Show also for more than a decade. Cole started her career at Essence Magazine, where she served as contemporary living editor and fashion director. She was founding editorial director of Uptown Magazine, editor of American Legacy Women, and creative director and editor-in-chief of Ebony. Please welcome Harriette Cole to introduce tonight's program.
Good evening. And thank you so much for coming out on this rainy day. It wasn't even that much rain, but all it takes is a little bit for us to say, oh no. And you said, oh yes, so thank you for being here. I have been part of Schomburg programs for over the years many times, but I have to tell you, it is such a delight to have been in conversation with Novella for several months and for us to partner on this conversation that brings my dream of Dream Leapers to my friend, Bethann Hardison, on this historic stage. So I want to thank Novella Ford and Kalila Bates, who really have helped to make this come to be possible. I also want to thank Toyota, who has been in partnership with me this year, through this year, in bringing Dream Leapers programs to many people in Harlem. A special thank you to Miss Jessie's and to Townley for special treats. And I want to tell you what Dream Leapers is. I call myself a Dream Leaper. I am one who has been dreaming since I was a little girl. Sometimes I hid those dreams in my closet, but eventually I activated them. So what does it mean? To me, it means someone who has the courage and the commitment not only to access the dream, but to figure out how to bring it into fruition. And this came to me, a friend of mine gave me a poem a few years ago and said, Harriette, this is for you. I said, okay. And I contemplated it, I meditated on it, and finally came to this iteration. But the poem says, come to the edge. We can't, we're afraid. Come to the edge. We can't, we will fall. Come to the edge. And they came. And he pushed them, and they flew. Dream Leapers is the push. We all need a push, but we need a responsible push. And so what I have been doing, I've created a number of different events to help people, to bring together the many people that I know who are willing to share their gifts and their knowledge about how to get to the next level, so that folks in the community can access and activate their dreams. In January, we had an Accessing Your Dream workshop that started with a guided meditation, followed by vision boarding and articulating of that dream. Not easy, but folks did it. Then we had a Perfecting Your Elevator Pitch workshop. You know, you can have the idea, you may even be doing it, but how do you talk about it? In March, we will have a workshop called So You Want to Be an Author. Who wants to be an author? Yeah, just about everybody says, I want to. But how do you get from that great idea to making it happen? One of the people who will be on the panel is here tonight, Constance White, who was the editor-in-chief of Essence, as well as many other things, and she has a new book called How to Slay. She will be on that panel. And in April, we will have a very important discussion, Sexual Harassment Today, How to Avoid Derailing Your Dream. Yes. So everyone should have received a card about next month's event, and you stay in touch with me, and we'll make sure that you know about these events. But today, I have the delightful honor of talking with my friend, Bethann Hardison, and we will begin our conversation right after this video.
I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, New York. That's in Brooklyn. We didn't, back in the day, it wasn't called Bed-Stuy. My mother and my father were completely different, but they both were dancers. She was a party girl. My father was much more structured. He was intellectual. He was someone who was going to influence his environment. Every summer, I spent in my grandmother's home in North Carolina. In those days, you see water fountains, and one would say colored, the other would say white. And inevitably, it was always the case. The colored one was so dirty. Why would anybody want to drink out of the other one? 9 years old. She said, one is for the colored and one is for the white. And I said, what a stupid idea.
Looking out on the morning rain.
Whatever happened to that mantra from the 60s that black is beautiful?
In fashion, racism is live. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, you just have to know that.
Bethann is a warrior. And mostly she's been a gladiator, by which I mean she's been alone.
She's worked tirelessly to make
diversity what it is today.
You know when it was most challenging? My first fashion show for Chester Weinberg. When I went out in that showroom, there were Southern buyers. And Southern buyers, as soon as I hit the showroom and I had to walk 3 rooms, they couldn't hold their heads up and look at me. They had never seen anything like that before, and that was shocking. Each time I went out, the room became noisier and noisier. That was one of the hardest things I had ever had in my life, and each time I came back, Chester must have sensed it because he would say, "Come on, you're a beautiful woman." He'd fix me. The confidence that it gives you to just for something like that to happen, someone having your back.
You're the key to my peace of mind.
Then you start knowing how you can do that too. I'm always in my heart fighting for the fashion model, no matter what color she's in.
Feel like a natural woman.
My everything, my bouncing ball, and she always used to call me her buffalo soldier.
You've done to me what you done to me.
The effect is really actually visible. I think a lot of the designers have listened to what she has said.
I went up to her and I introduced myself and I said, "Thank you."
When you start to see people of color, just all kinds of different people in ads, it looks great. It lets you know that you are accepted.
Change things. You might need to be your foot against the pedal, but you can change things.
A natural woman.
Thank you very much. Very, very much. Thank you for
I
coming.
think we're excited. Yes?
Yeah, it's fun. It's going to be fun.
I want to say that video that we just saw was prepared in honor of Bethann when she received the CFDA award in 2014.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
I never thought so.
And very nice to see
Thank you.
your history, a bit of your history. I've known Bethann since 1990, so we go back a minute. When I became the fashion editor of Essence, you were a presence.
I knew you before then.
Was it before then?
Yeah, yes. You were just working at it.
See?
No.
She has the long memory.
Yes, it's good. It's good.
And what I remember about you then is true now. But sometimes a quiet force, sometimes a ferocious force, but always a force, and a force of kindness. You were giving me directions. This is what I remember one time I was hungry and we were at a fashion show. I was hungry. Sometimes there were like 12 shows in a row. And I had a little sandwich and I was sitting on the front row and I took a little piece of my sandwich and Bethann went, no, no, no.
Yeah.
You may not do that. You guide us.
Yeah.
We were on a panel recently and one of the things that I remember saying about you, because folks were talking about how body image is something that's very challenging for some folks, especially folks of color. Body image, skin tone, how to be in the fashion industry and reckon with who you are. And you shared that has not been an issue for you.
You mean the fact that I said that I didn't need to have an image to make myself feel good about myself?
Yes.
Yes, many people say that. They need to see their self-reflection in advertising and different things, and it makes them feel better about who they are.
Why do you think it hasn't been something that bothered you?
I don't know. I came up in a very, it was all good growing up. It wasn't like anything that you had to. I was very lucky. Iman said that one time, that we both were very blessed, maybe being Muslim daughters too, and she's coming from one place in the world, I'm coming from another, that we were very blessed at how we were raised. And I just, even though I didn't become Muslim until I was 12 when I went to live with my father, it was just living in Bedford-Stuyvesant, everything was happening, everything was good, everything was cool. I did everything I wanted to do as a child. I mean, I really basically went out and You know, my mother and my grandmother were domestics, and I was a latchkey kid from the time I was 7, and they just they allowed me to do because I seemed to have been the leader between the three of us. Mm-hmm. I always knew what I wanted to do, and I was always going off and, you know, challenging myself with things, and, you know, becoming a well-known child tap dancer, running track, being in a gang from the age of 9 to 12.
From the age of 9 to 12, okay.
Lady chaplains.
But Bethann, talk a bit about Bedford-Stuyvesant, because I remember when I moved to Harlem, right before moving to Harlem, our beloved Harlem, many people said to me, don't move to Harlem, it's dangerous. And my mother and her brother came to New York to look at the neighborhood, walked around, talked to all the neighbors.
What street were you?
On 120th Street.
That's Easy Street.
This was in 1985.
Yeah, but there was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of,
it was not Easy
tough.
Street.
Yeah, it was tough.
But what my mother and grandmother said is, this is just like the neighborhood we grew up in Baltimore. These are neighbors. They will take care of you if you are kind to them. And then she walked to everyone and said, this is my daughter. She's moving in. You need to watch out for her. Yeah. And they did. Yeah. But Bedford-Stuyvesant, at one point, had the reputation the way that Harlem had this reputation, which we learned wasn't true. And but I want you to address, what was your Bedford-Stuyvesant?
No, Bedford-Stuyvesant wasn't like, Harlem was different. Harlem was always had some true grit in some other way. It was a place people went up to. No one from Harlem came to Bedford-Stuyvesant, but everybody.
When you were growing up.
Yeah.
So what was it like? What was
people went to Harlem,
like?
but nobody went to Bedford. Who's going to leave Harlem to go to Bedford-Stuyvesant? I mean, that's like going to Astoria, Queens to you. The fact of it is that for me, Bedford-Stuyvesant was a great community. My mother was someone who was popular, and she also was someone who hung out in bars, and all the bars were always great. The men on the corners, you know, that's why I have no problem with sexual harassment, because I was harassed for a time I was a kid, and you harassed them back. You know, I mean, right? It's not. We handle it. And it gave you confidence. You know what I mean? And of course, you know, it was just a tree-lined block. The teachers would tell us that we were low middle income, and that was true. But it wasn't like we weren't making it. I grew up with my mother and my grandmother, and we lived in rooming houses, and we lived in rooms, 2 rooms, and the 3 of us made do. And I really have to, when I look back, and even them, they'd always ask me, well, where are you going now, Bethann? Where are you going now? I had a new friend I changed churches every 3 weeks. There was always someone I met that went to that church. And you know, the difference in my household, no one was demanding that you go to church or anything like that. So the life was very nice. The environment was very nice. We lived in a brownstone, and I wanted to run track. My grandmother and my mother didn't want me to do that, but I did it anyway, and I became successful for Wynn Center, Gates Avenue. You know, and I always say, now that I'm so involved watching the Olympics, but I always say, that life is athleticism, and being an athlete at any age and having a great coach, you never forget your coach. And Coach Palmer meant everything to me. He taught me many good things because I ran relay, and that whole thing of, he punished me so many times because what I would do is I just couldn't wait for the baton to hit my palm. I'd always look back, and he'd make me do laps after the track meet. He said, Bethann, you've got to learn to run your own race. I say that to people all the time.
Well, I was going to ask you about the early influences. So there's one. You have to learn how to run your own race, which is what you have done.
And you have to have other people tell them that too, so that they can stop looking at what she's doing, what he's doing, and feeling like, I need to really, I want to be like them, or I want to do. The great thing of not knowing what you want to do growing up is that you don't have anything that you look forward to doing. You're just trying to get from point A to point B. And that was always my case when people think, oh my goodness, you must have known all about what inspired you to go up and do your own company. People...
What did?
People pushed me to do it. I didn't want to have my own company. I just wanted to be as lazy as I could be and work for other people. And the fact of it is that you know, they just make you feel like, you know. Then I had this white guy in my life.
Wait. You're going too far ahead.
No, I'm not. Joe McDonald. I just got
Sassy.
No, Joe McDonald. I just want to tell you about Joe McDonald because he was a guy. He was the first guy that he was in the industry, model industry. He died of AIDS, but Joe used to say to me all the time, he made me feel self-conscious about who I was and me not want to be on my own. I didn't want to have my own business. And that's why I wanted to bring him up. You can say this because it was his way of speaking to me that made me feel like I wasn't representing my people. Like I had the opportunity to do so many things. So many people wanted to put money behind me if I'd come. You know, I would remember Michael Cody begged me to be an editor at Women's Wear Daily. He would take me out to lunch every week, introduce me to more people, trying to get me just to commit to things, and I just never wanted to do it. It was Joe who would say to me, you know, what are you, lazy? Come on. And I think back and I'm thinking, I'm a girl from Bethann, I'm in this white world where everyone's offering me things, and all I want to do is just be left alone so I can just be quiet. And that helped me to sort of like not do it for me, but to do it for the opportunity of those who probably would never have an opportunity.
You've said, yeah, absolutely. As we were talking the other day, you said they made me do it.
I always say
kind
that.
of a mantra in a way.
Yeah.
That there were many people who pushed you.
To do many, yeah.
But in the beginning, what was that first entry into the world of fashion, which you described differently than the world of fashion? What was that entry point?
I grew up in the garment district. It wasn't a fashion industry, I mean. The garment district, my first job was at a custom button factory because at that point, the suit and coat factories, manufacturers it was a big apparel world then. And so this company was good. They did all the custom buttons for all of the wonderful designers who did that. So, you know, he gave me a job. I came dressed like, you know, like a kid from Bethann would so well. And it's a factory, and he's looking at me like, you know, I want to give you this job, but you can't dress like that. So I try to tone it down, but he still said, well, God, you're not really getting it right, you know? So the good thing that he did is he put me out to go to the design companies to take the buttons so that because he thought I looked too good to be in the factory all day. And that was a great thing, you know, going into the companies and going behind those doors, and you see what's behind it, like in the showrooms at those showrooms back then were really elegant. They were like ateliers, you know, and going and giving the guy so he can look and see if it matched the fabric. It was great. And then that one time I saw, you know, Helen Williams on the street. I was dying, you know.
So for those who don't know, who is Helen Williams?
Helen Williams was a wonderful model at the time that was really kind of cool. You know, people think, you know, well, okay. My first model that I loved was Carol Lindley. She was a blonde, blue-eyed girl. Had nothing to do with her color. It was just the fact she was beautiful. I guess I knew I was going to be a model agent. Now I look back because I discovered this girl. The person that really took my heart after that was Helen Williams. She was a beautiful brown woman who was like could have been Irving Penn's wife. She was equal to her. She was a really elegant, beautiful brown woman, but she worked a lot. And I saw her on the street, and I really quietly stalked. I followed her, and she was carrying a lot of bags, you know, because back in the day, we had to bring all of our accessories, our stockings and our shoes and everything you needed as a model. You brought it with you, and so I watched her, and I was going back to my office at the button factory, this Cabot button factory, by the way, and Helen, I just walked up to her because she kept trying to carry everything. I said, do you know where you're going? Can I help you? And she looked at me and she said, well, I'm trying to find this address, and she gave me the address, and I said, oh, I know where that is. Let me take some of this. Well, I died and went to heaven that I was carrying her bags. Oh my God, it's like, you know, meeting like, I don't know, Paul McCartney, the Beatles when you're, you know, like a kid. But in the end of the day, that was somebody who was, and I still, when I was going to start to do this documentary, and I had Dorothea Tolles, and I had, you know, Helen. I talked to Helen. She sent me photographs of herself. You know, she was the monster mash.
And so, from being at the button company, Cabot Button, seeing her, what was that step that got you in the door? Was it Willie Smith?
Oh no,
Was
I
it
had
before? Was
I
it
had a
before?
journey.
Yeah.
Oh,
Tell us about that.
I grew up in the garment district. I worked at Cabot Button, and then I went on to, you see, hang in there. Then I went on to another company.
When you have a long,
I will have that
career,
name in 2 seconds. No, this is important because
Okay.
he was like such an incredible man. Anyway, so I went to this other company and I worked as assistant to a piece good, and then they taught me how to do the switchboard. Then they took me and put me in behind salesmen who go out on the road, and you had to do all the accounting for them. And so I did that company, and then the girl who worked there knew that her aunt and mother needed somebody, and she said, Bethann, why don't you come work? And that was Marty Gutmarker. Ooh, I told you. Marty Gutmarker, yeah, that was brilliant. That was low-end dresses, by the way. And it's a great, interesting thing because, you know, to work in the garment district, I learned a lot, and I wouldn't pass that up for anything in the world. We all did. Anybody who did work in the garment district really did in those years. And this was like the 60s, late 60s. So I then went to work for Ruth Manchester, which is a junior dress company. And this was the first time that I got an opportunity to work in the showroom. And there was no one black in the showrooms in those days, you know. And so I had this opportunity. And they, you know, when Ruth would send me out there to work with a customer, after they trained me about everything else, they wouldn't want to work with me, of course, because, you know, who is she, what would she know to do? They always want to talk to the main person. And so I did that, and then Willie Smith discovered me as he'd see me walking in the garment district. He thought I was a designer. He kept asking people, did they know me? And no one seemed to that he knew. And then one girl, when they were coming back from Federated, when they used to have the girls walk around to give the orders to the design companies from the stores, he described me, and she said, I know who you're talking about. And then he gave her a note. She came to me and gave me the note, and then I went and met him downstairs in 1407 Dessert Club.
So at this point, where is Willie Smith in his career?
He was just in digits, and he was very successful. You know, he was just 19 or 20 years old, and he was being written up all the time, which was really kind of inspiring. And he asked me if I could be like his muse. He wanted to have someone. He thought I had style. When he found out that I wasn't a designer, why is it so funny? I do have style. I mean, I had a lot of style then. I don't give a hoot now.
You still do, my dear.
But anyway, so I, you know, he thought I had a lot of style. And I did. And you know what's so funny about this? People in the industry used to say to me in the garment district when I'd walk, they say, hi, Willie. And I said it happened to me 2 or 3 times, and I started answering, hi. Because the way I was very skinny, and I dressed very, I don't know how, but anyway, Willie was very attracted to my style anyway. But my first fashion show was with Bernie Ozer for Federated. And it was all because I went up to him as I was taking the dresses from Ruth Manchester, and I just said, you know, listen, when I see that he likes to put on a real show, and he likes Broadway, and he tries to entertain his buyers, and I could see what he was doing, you know. And a child tap dance, I hadn't had that opportunity, you know. I used to tap. I was such a well-known child tap dancer. I used to tap on radio. I mean, they would, you know, well, anyway. So I wound up saying to him, you know, I would like very much if you would give me an opportunity. I'd be really great in your show. I had never done a fashion show. I didn't know anything about it. And he said, what's your name? And I thought he was going to report me to my boss. And I just told him my name. And then, you know, by the time I got back to my office, my boss said, this is so wonderful growing up in that background. Ruth and Sylvie was so excited for me. Oh my goodness, Bernie wants you in the show. I mean, I was encouraged along the way, all the way, to do things outside of what I was doing. It wasn't like, you know, well, she can't because she's working there. They said, you have to do it. I said, he really called here and asked for me? She said, yeah, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. And I did it. And so it came on like that.
Tell us about being a model for Willie Smith.
Well, it was different because the fact of it is that I did it only like if he had an appearance. I did that. And then when I lost my job, you know, I lost my job at Ruth Manchester. it was very interesting. What happened is that, first of all, you know, you're young. I had a boyfriend, and he started disappearing, and then I couldn't get out of bed.
And then you got fired.
Then I got fired.
And by the way, an important thing that you have talked about, which is different for some people in the industry, you always had a job.
Always had a job. Oh yeah, no. I couldn't even.
Talk about that.
I couldn't even imagine modeling, and well, I couldn't imagine how much money that would add up to be able to afford to live as anything more. And it was a runway anyway. But interesting enough, you know, like I say about, you know, another thing that was interesting, Ruth Manchester, they being Jewish, and God knows, thank God for all of that in my life too. My grandmother and my mother worked for very good people in that background, and they were very supportive to us as well as to me, and it taught me a great deal. But what happened is that, you know, living with my father, from the time I'm 12 years old, I became very well educated, and this wasn't in school. This man was an extraordinary human being. You know, he mentored Malcolm, McCoy Tyner, Dakota Staten, anybody who was thinking to become Muslim. When Elijah Muhammad, you know, thought he wanted to come to New York from Chicago, they called my father because he was well known. So living with him, you know, I learned a lot about what was in the world, what was going on in the Middle East, what was happening with the Kennedys. I learned a lot from my dad. He was educating me constantly. Oh, it's nice, thank you. And so working with Ruth, it was really with still the Israeli, you know, Arab war was going on. Still, even then, I always said, I made a statement one time, and she turned on me. It just shows you how passionate she was about being Jewish, and I'm a young person making a statement that really wasn't that, shouldn't have been that considered that deep, but she took it to heart. And because, of course, I understood the other. I was educated to understand both sides. So I, of course, wasn't just, you know, just about one. I understood, so I had support for the Arabs. And so so it made it very uncomfortable anyway. So when my boyfriend started acting up, and then, you know, I just started falling asleep and never waking up. So I got fired. But it really was sad because she really wouldn't speak to me. Sylvia was fine, you know, her sister was fine, but she just wouldn't speak to me anymore. Yeah, so that was my story in that.
It's interesting because you talk about the depth of knowledge that your father brought to you and navigating in the garment industry, which is largely run by Jewish people. Historically, we've had these debates, even though there's such similarity.
Yes.
You have navigated this industry fighting whenever you have needed to. Why was there no fear around that? About fighting when you need to fight, speaking up when you need to speak.
Well, I didn't do it until I was, you know, until you have a platform. You just don't, you know, you just don't jump out in the air. You know, you have to have a stage to dance on in every instance of life. And that's why I think about life being related to athleticism to me. You know, having the courage to outdo yourself and to have compassion for others and to be a good sports person about things. And so for me, it wasn't like there was any problem, you know, about, what was the question?
Let's move on to another
my
one.
head, you
That's
don't know,
all right.
I'm flying. You have no idea where I'm going.
I want to move on to another question because I want to talk more about your modeling career.
Oh.
And you were...
I didn't have a career ever. Okay. But go ahead.
Your days of modeling.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
That's true.
You were part of the first, I believe, most historic moment for American fashion with European fashion, the battle, what they began later to call the Battle of Versailles.
Okay, cool.
In 1973. Prior to that, American fashion was not considered fashion. It was clothing. Well,
sportswear.
By others,
No,
it was sportswear.
It was mostly, we are, that's the truth, we are known mostly for sportswear.
Right. And so there was not the sense of respect that there was for traditional European designers. The American designers went over, including our beloved Stephen Burrows, and a group of black models. Yes, yes. And you were among those models. Can you tell us about that time and that moment, your experience of this?
You know, the difference with me with that, pardon me, is because of the fact that I was the assistant to Stephen. So I ran the design studio. It wasn't that, and because I fit the clothes at that time too, he just needed me to be there to assist him, number one. It was just, and Anne Klein had called me over because people knew I modeled, but I always had a job. It's true, a full-time job. I modeled as a runway model, and runway models and print models is completely two different worlds, and it's two different divisions. At that time, it was clearly the runway model or the fashion model supplied the designers on Broadway as well as on 7th Avenue. So, of course, I had this job with Stephen, so I had to literally, he wanted me to be there because he needed my help. I'm his assistant. Mm-hmm. And so Anne Klein needed my help because she was doing what she thought was the African-inspired collection. So she called me to her office and she wanted, why you're all your... I'm going to clear the room. Now, when I say that, I don't mean it, well, I guess you're right. Well, I guess you're right. But she, okay, all right, you're right. She basically needed help. Because at that time, there was a lot of girls of color that were working, and she needed help, but she had never had that experience, and she needed my help.
And how did you help her? What did you do?
You know, gave her some guidance about what, and she was nervous because she was going to Versailles. She was the only woman. At the time, she knew she was ill. I didn't know that. She needed my help. She needed to lean on someone. I worked with Stephen, but I was known as a good runway model, and she knew that I could help her decide. Because if you're also like a professional or like an executive, it's easier for someone like that to talk to you. You're not just a model. I mean, because a model is like going to be looking out for themselves, and, you know, and they don't have all that experience in that other way. And
you had a lot of experience.
I had
in
another
garment
working garment business. So she knew that, and I was in 550 with Stephen, and so I was there for her, and she then wanted me to be in the show. So I had 2 designers, and each model had to have 3 designers in order to be accepted to go. That was tough for me because I didn't work for a lot of people, and so I only had 2, and up to, I think it was 7 days before, or maybe 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave, I still only had 2 designers, Stephen and Anne, and I needed, so Halston kept saying to Stephen, don't worry, she's going to go, even if I have to take it. I wasn't a Halston girl. And he said, even if I have to, I'll say yes. And I think eventually Oscar said yes. I don't remember. See, that's how much I cared. I don't remember who was the 3rd designer I worked for. But the fact of it is, I got in at the last minute. And I mean, Stephen was fitting that dress on me, and I'll never forget the dress that he wanted me to wear. It was his dedication to couture, and it was the yellow dress. And it was the only dress that was not knit. Mostly he doesn't work in woven goods. And I had to fit that dress, and he was doing the all underpinnings like couture is done. And I remember fainting twice, falling down in the middle of the night, and we had 3 days before. So it was really a great thing, and that idea of doing this show was, you know, it was just a great thing to go to Paris and all that, and the fact that they were saying that, you know, it started out to be a wonderful, nice benefit, and then it got to be the media. Once again, that media. They start to, you know, like insinuate things and say things, and so even the people.
What was the insinuation?
That, you know, that it made no sense for these American designers to go all the way to Paris because there's no contest. But there was never supposed to be a contest. It was a joint.
It was a benefit, right?
To benefit the Marie Antoinette Theater that was a part of the Hall of Versailles. And that was, you know, between Francoise de Laurenta, which was the first wife of Oscar de Laurenta, and Eleanor Lambert's idea to do something. And Eleanor was thinking about how great it would be for American designers to get them exposure, because she represented practically each and every one of them. And so that it was a nice joint idea. And then it just got to turn. And everybody that was American all the press people were always going to support us. And then all of a sudden, when the press started coming out that we were making a mistake and that we shouldn't be going there, you started watching the people, all of a sudden they weren't coming. I think one editor from a Midwest paper, Mary Lou Luther?
That's Los Angeles, Mary Lou Luther.
Well, someone in the Midwest, somewhere, she was definitely still coming, and Bill Cunningham was going to come, of course.
Yep.
But in essence, thank you, Bill. In essence, it was really like it made people feel nervous. They felt bad for us now. Now they feel like, oh God, they're going to go.
What's going to happen?
Yeah, and well, we ain't going to be sitting there with them because we're not. And that was really the results of the attitude. And so they basically it became just us.
And then Stephen Burrows told me that when you all got there, the set designer had actually created the set based upon the metric system. Based upon inches, and it was supposed to be centimeters, and so the set didn't work?
Yeah.
So the dramatic set that the Europeans had, when it was your turn, it was the flat set.
There was no set.
There was nothing.
There was nothing.
There was no set.
And
so it was the models.
So it was just the models, and it was the music. And that's something that had never happened to. That's another thing most people don't realize, that what we had done in the 70s was the designers like Giorgio Santangelo and Halston, and all the designers were coming along, and Steve and all them, and Calvin even, after Calvin started to come along. Everybody used music. That wasn't known to be done in Paris. That wasn't done. So that really helped us. We had nothing. Well, the French had everything. They had everything and everybody. And we had just the girls and the dancers and Liza. And so, and thank God for Kay Thompson. God bless Kay. Because Kay Thompson, I mean, you have no idea what a genius woman. And that was so great about being someone who's not a model, but part of the deal where you're working behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Because then you're in on all the talk and the fighting, and you're hearing everything, but you're also getting closer to the people who are producing things. You weren't so busy being a model. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult.
When you came back, there seemed to be a seismic shift in understanding of what American design meant, at least from the media's perspective. Right. Magazines were looking at American fashion differently. But for you, in your work and career, what were you doing when you came back after 73?
Help me.
Were you still working with Willie?
I'm trying. Yeah, right?
Well,
no.
I
had a long time before. 73.
Were you still working with Stephen when you came back?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. I worked with Stephen.
How long did you work for Stephen?
I worked with Stephen, I don't know the time. But I know it was a journey, because I started out with Roz, because that's when they were still connected, and he got funded, and so I got in because I was going to be the showroom model, and then I went from showroom model to fit model, and then from fit model, the staff changed. People started to leave, then I started to assist Stephen directly, and then I became I ran the design studio. And the company loved me, because I was such an efficient worker that they let me go to Paris and work, because our shows were then after Paris, it wasn't before. So they would let me go to Paris and work as a model, and then I was working then for, I worked a little bit for Kenzo, but mostly I worked for Issey Miyake, and I worked for Claude Montana, and I worked for Michel Klein, and I worked for, a few. I had no reason for going other than,
What about Valentino?
No, I worked at that, but that was as a job.
Okay. So I had no career as a model. You heard her say that, right?
But I didn't.
No career as a model in all those.
But I never. No. To be clear about things, and this is something that's unusually said, I think. I never had a career. What you have to understand is that people say, well, what is your career? And because words are so important to me and how things are explained, I never had, it's not like, a career is when someone has one thing that they do and they build on it. That's a career. Yeah, you know, I'll clap for that. That's a career. If you're, you know, jack of all trades and master of none, I don't know where the career is. But if you basically are someone who, I was open to just walk the step, cross the line, go up the hill, whatever was necessary and how I could find a way. I worked with designers who asked me to please help them with collections. I did that after I left Stephen and all them. I did a lot of things. I have a lot of experience, but that's not a career. My career is breathing. Breathing.
All right.
That's my career. That's what I know I do consistently.
And we're glad you do, Bethann.
That's my career.
Okay, I want to ask you about one of your dear friends.
You know what I'm saying?
We do know.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about one of your dear friends, for you to tell us when and how you met Iman.
Oh, Iman, yeah, that's a story. Iman, oh boy, you're talking about a sensation of controversy, because Iman was discovered by Peter Beard in Nairobi, I presume, I think. And he sent back a message to Wilhelmina that he had found this girl in the bush and that she was extraordinary. And so Wilhelmina said, well, you have to show me pictures. He shows these extraordinary pictures. And it was all in the pitch, you know, and the idea, you know, it's all the bush, and Africa, and, you know, Wilhelmina's cool, and she's not from America per se anyway, so she's like, well, sounds great. And so they say yes, and let's get this girl over here. And Peter makes it a press conference. He built this to such a crescendo. And so she comes into town, and they have a press conference, and Iman is all laid out on the floor, you know, and the cameras are going, and they cannot, it's so funny. And, you know, she's from the bush, so surely she can't speak English. She doesn't speak any English, they all assume. And so they all are taking, and Marsha Gillespie,
who was the editor-in-chief of Essence at the time,
had a fit. I mean, she let the world know that this is just BS. You don't go way over to Africa and bring some girl back that's a model, and with all the beautiful girls we have in the United States of America, that's what you're going to do? Also, Iman was not welcomed. So this was a very interesting thing for her, because she really was not welcomed. And she was nervously unaccepted, except for by Wilhelmina, who had already signed on the dotted line, and, you know, Peter, who had sold the concept. And, you know, then she was this fragile little bird, you know. And so everybody wants to see,
who is she?
Who is she? Because she's all in the press. Stephen says, you know, get her up in here. And so I call the agency, and they send her. And this girl comes in, and the two showroom girls, because now I've graduated, I'm the assistant to designer, and I now have two showroom girls working for us. And they're in their room and you take people in there to get dressed, and I take Iman in there because she has to put on shoes to put on the dress, and she puts the dress on, and then she's never even worn heels before. So, and I think she's been there maybe 10 days now in America, and she's trying to put the shoe on, and I can see she's trying so hard, and I get down on my knees and I start to help her to put the shoe on, and the girl, Elwanda, I know Elwanda, she's in the back. She said, what's she doing getting on her knees? That girl ain't no princess or nothing. She needs to get up off her knees. And so I'm down on the knees, because that's what we do in the business. What we do, we dress people, it's common. But because this girl, Iman, came in on this carpet ride, and black girls were like, nah, negative. So I looked up at Iman, and I said, you understand her, don't you? And she said, and so I continued to put the shoe on, and she saw Stephen. From that day, Iman calls me her Statue of Liberty, because I was the first one, yeah. says I'm the first one, as far as she's concerned. She wrote it in her book, and she tells it to everyone all still, that I was the first person to receive her, and that she felt that there was something that she could feel she could hold on to. Yeah. But let me tell you, we don't get along, you know. She is my bestie for many days gone by. The 70s, she came here after
Versailles.
We don't agree on hardly anything, but yet here we are. We stick together, and thank God.
That's a real friend.
Yeah.
Bethann, tell about moving from working for Stephen, working in showrooms, modeling, to working at Click, modeling agency.
Oh, there was a long history before that. And I worked for Valentino. I did a lot of things.
Let's talk about Valentino first.
Yeah. The Valentino I worked for because, you know, they wanted me, you know. I was very close to Carlos Souza, and I lived in Brazil a lot, and Carlos was Brazilian, and Valentino was in Brazil, and he became the connection to Carlos, and I remained close to him. So they wanted me to work with them, and I worked with them. Yes, I did. I helped them.
And what was your job?
I was to be the liaison between anything that would happen for advertising. Like when Deborah Tuberville did their advertising, they would tell Deborah or whoever that they had to have me there because I was to represent them, to make sure things went the way they would anticipate. But when I went to work with Click, that was just because Frances Grill at the time was just making this agency, and she had all these she had all these dark girls, that's what it was, and some of these white boys. It was the weirdest thing, this Jewish woman, God bless Frances. And it was an odd thing, but she had asked if I could come and help her with the agency. And at that time, somebody else had asked me to be an editor of this bogus guy came along and claimed he was going to do this incredible magazine, and he got all of us involved. It's amazing. You know, a scammer. If we're all lucky not to meet someone who's a con artist, and this was a guy who was a con artist. He conned people up to Macy's. Everybody got in line. And it was known that I was going to be the editor-in-chief. So that's why Frances reached out to me, and that's how I first knew about her agency, even though she and I knew each other from Sweden, because she had her mate and my mate were friends. So she just reached out to me knowing I was close to Bruce and different people like that, and she wanted me to help her. And I went there and saw what she was doing. I didn't go there right away, but then eventually I did go. I went there, you know, when she changed things and got things together, because it was just her doing it by herself. But once she got Alan Mindell to come in and work with it, then the agency started to take up a little bit.
So for context, because you're mentioning all these people who, we want to know stories about these folks. Bruce Weber.
He was Willie Smith. That's Willie Smith's connection. Bruce was a model, and he was working with Zoli, and he gave that up and wanted to do photography. And Willie was this kind of guy who always helped everyone, connected people, always making sure you saw if you saw talent with someone, he wanted that person that had talent to meet that other person with talent. And he wanted me to really model, and I really didn't want to model, but I love being a fashion model, but I didn't want to be a print model. But Willie thought there was something there, so he had Bruce meet me, and Bruce and I used to spend weekends together every weekend. Going out, he would shoot me, and when I see his pictures, of course, I think, well, then I could maybe do it, because his pictures were always good. And anybody else I would try to test with, I go, oh, no, this is not going to work. But that was our, until he just really basically, we would go to Central Park and take pictures, and it was just a great little relationship.
Can you talk about the difference between the runway model and the print model, and when that whole thing changed?
The runway model was, it had its own agencies, and the print models were girls who just did editorial, catalog, advertising. The runway model, and the model agency, as I say to many people, it's not the fashion industry. The model industry services the fashion industry. But everyone gets lost because everybody wants to be in fashion. So the fact of it is that it became a thing where the runway model, the agencies and her objective was to service the fashion designers or anybody in the industry that were manufacturers. And Calvin, being the extreme brilliant marketer he has always been, came up with the idea that he wanted those editors to see his clothes on the girl that they would conceive could be in the pages, so that way they could imagine his clothes. So he took the girl from the editorial, brought her onto the runway. They couldn't walk, didn't matter. That meant that the runway model was going to start getting squeezed out, like, like what's happening in New York City right now with all those buildings going up and knocking down all our beautiful little wholesome neighborhoods. Something has to replace. And the great thing about, the good news and the bad news about that is that the good news is that he kept me to the very end. I was the last model he pretty much used. I think you I'm looking at you now, Audrey. Yeah. What was that? I thought you said that one time. Did you know that? What did I say? Okay, I'm not gonna. I forget. It was something I just remembered, but it was somebody who had said to me, "Isn't that funny? Calvin has used you, and you're the last runway model that he used." He held on to me to the very end. And meanwhile, I still had a job. I had a job with Stephen, and but he did.
When was that?
76, 77, 70.
And so prior to that,
earlier,
in terms of the balance of who was doing runway, black models were primarily doing runway, is that right?
White models too.
White models too. And what about black models in print?
Well, there was the commercial, like if you said, you go to Black Beauty Model Agency. There's a lot of black models, but then they're not fashion models. Those are what we see in advertising. Those are the models that we all know. Richard Roundtree, all those kind of, so many people who were models. But the runway model, which was really the girls, as you see, that were hired to do the shows and come on the 7th Avenue, and that was what that was.
And who were those girls back then? Tell me who some of the models were, who you were.
Oh, when we went to that next level.
Yes.
Oh, that like the Giorgio San Angelo, and those movies, yeah. That was Norma Jean Darden, Billy Blair, Bethann Hardison, Pat Cleveland, Alva Chen, Ramona Saunders, oh boy, Amina Wasuma. Keep talking. It was a lot. There were a lot of cool white girls too who would never probably, be on the other pages. They were, but there were a lot.
So as Calvin Klein made this shift to get the editors to put his clothes on those models in their pages, an unintended consequence was that many runway models lost work. Is that right?
Yeah, but a lot of those girls, see, that was a different wave. A lot of those girls start to be, could do edit, like Pat Cleveland. She could do editorial. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That was the next wave. Those girls hadn't even started to come along too much when Calvin started making his little moves. They started to come along with the help of, other Halston, Giorgio San Angelo, and I keep naming them because, people don't remember about Giorgio, but Giorgio he meant a lot to us.
Sure.
And then also Stephen, and they just mixed it up. They didn't, there was not about, well, we like black girls. It was just like whoever the girl was that was cool, that she had the body, she had style. That was the girl. And it could be anything. It could be another girl. I mean, it didn't have to be of color, but it just so happened New York had started to shift too because, that was right before Studio 54. Everything in New York started to be good again. New York goes through cycles where people will say often, New York, I don't know, I'm not feeling this so much anymore. That's been a constant in our history of New York City. It's like, and the Europeans go away. And then all of a sudden something happened great in New York, and the Europeans will come back and they'll say, New York is really good now, And that's what happened. And so you start to change a little bit. So we had that moment where, you needed the content of style and great-looking girls. So that's when Studio 54 came along. But that was really, Calvin was already established by then. Halston was really established, So they came along at that really other edge.
So tell us about Studio 54. There's some people here who didn't have that experience.
Yeah.
Take us into Studio 54.
I really didn't want to go to Studio 54. I was a naysayer about.
I was very annoyed that they were going to do it because I was a dance kid, and you know, to me, everything was the loft and the Palladium, you know, Leviticus. You know, it was all like, you know, it was, you know, this now here comes Steve and Ian going to come along and do something. These guys from Queens, they're going to do this club, and they're going to have alcohol. What dancer drinks alcohol? No, dancers don't drink alcohol. You smoke a little weed, you drink a lot of water. You don't want to lose the balance. You drink alcohol, you can't stay in the step. So why would you do that? And so that was like a corny thing, you know, that was like, what is he there doing it? So I was really anti, and Steve would say, you know, he went to the same high school I did, and he said, you have to come, it's going to be the greatest thing ever. I said, oh yeah, really? I was such a snob about the whole thing. And then the opening night, you know, everybody had to go, and you know, you had to get talked into going. You know, when you're a snob about things, you don't want to show up and be seen because you've been talking negative about the thing for like weeks and months. And then here your ass is showing up and not really the greatest look. But there's so many people going, no one's going to remember that you said, nah, nah, nah. And then it wound up being, you know, a great thing. But it was the greatest thing, you know, for me as I travel the world and watch, you know, all these velvet ropes around these clubs. If they only knew that Steve he did it all. He created this wonderful thing. He stood outside. He would really, it wasn't like, see, the thing that's so sad about what the clubs around the world have done, they don't even know who actually created this, which is so bad when history just falls. You know, he didn't pick the person that you would think he'd pick. He picked people that you would have never picked. You know, he picked the guy and the weird guy. He'd look right over, and all the European, all looking at, trying to look with the beautiful girls next to him, trying to be picked. And he would look and pick some drag queen way over in the corner. Ordinary human beings rebel, by the way. And he stay out there all night. Once the club started happening, he'd stay out there all night long, doing the summer, winter, spring, fall. It was like a casting. That's how the best way I could explain it to you. It was like a casting. He chose how to make you be interested in what was going on inside, because everyone was allowed. The right people were allowed, and it was probably the wrong person, the people who are doing it now. But that's what he did that was so brilliant. So going inside, it was, yeah, you know, the tables are downstairs, and the booths are downstairs, and everyone has a booth, you know. I used to have this thing that, what's the artist's name with the curl? Come on, help me.
Dolly?
Dolly. He used to have a thing for me. So he always, when he'd come and he'd say, there's the girl, please get her for me. And I'd go and sit and, you know, I'm corny, so, you know, it's like, yeah, okay. So I'd sit and talk with him. But it's an interesting thing about being in that world. You never had to be somebody. You just had to have style. You had style. You could sit with Halston, you know, you're sitting there talking to Truman Capote. They're not important. You're important because you're the essence of the club. You're the ones who's making it look interesting. And to me, you know, the bar, I just hated the whole idea of the bar. But that was the thing that was happening. And of course, you know, it's the drugs. And what was so great about it also was how Studio 54 helped the music industry.
Yes.
Because what they did is they taught that, they created that 8-beat so that people learned to dance. So I was like,
that's right. That's right.
So everyone could dance, you know. You know, there's no, you know, there's no, none of that. Studio 54.
And so another side of that, as time moves on, in the early 80s, then we're faced with the AIDS epidemic. Yeah. And it really did impact the fashion world early on.
It affected our New York City very much. It affected a lot. You know, Steve died of AIDS, and he had my girlfriend my girlfriend, who basically was his girlfriend. That's some people think, but he had a girlfriend. Well, yeah, okay. Do the math. It was his girlfriend, but he also had, it was a lot of people, so many people. Like I said, Joe McDonough, he was the first person that got sick, that we didn't even know what was wrong with him. They kept saying epilepsy, some kind of disease with the birds. They didn't know, they couldn't figure it out. Mm-hmm. It was a terrible thing that happened because it just started it was like a brush fire.
It was.
It went so fast. People were going so quickly. And you always knew the look. I remember looking over at Perry Ellis's guy, and I just looked, and then Andre said, "How do you know that?" I always could see it in the face. Everyone had this look. It's the most undignified death besides losing your mind. The most undignified death. My heart, so not cool. It's really, and so that. And losing your mind. I can't even imagine losing your mind. That to me is another one. I mean, that you know, but you can't express. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So with AIDS, you're just crippled from nowhere. You don't know how it happened, and there you are. And it's ravaging through your body. And I went to see Angela, which was mine and Stephen's assistant once. And that's why, the hospital in front of my building, that's it, just to go to see him, It's just, we lost a lot of people.
We did.
We lost a lot of people.
I want to ask you something else, and then we're going to have a conversation.
But I want to talk about something, too. Okay.
What? Please.
No. I'll tell you about it later. I'll see if it fits. Go ahead.
All right. I'm switching completely.
Okay.
Because we could talk for days and weeks and months, and we can't at this moment. I want to talk about your activism. So we're moving forward. We're jumping ahead. Having worked in the industry for a long time, having your own agency, where Bethann, among many others, identified Naomi Campbell and Tyson Beckford and many other great models, but the whole world knows them. You began to see on the other side of your career that the model of color was not.
I don't have a career.
Excuse me.
I don't like,
you know what? She did say words are important, and I know they are. At a different moment in time, that the model of color was not being seen, was kind of going away. And I remember you saying, I think I have to come out of retirement and do something about this.
I had to leave Mexico.
Tell us about what happened and why you felt it was important to stand up and speak.
Well, okay. Once again, they pushed me to do it. When I left the industry, meaning leaving my model agency and took a hiatus to go to Mexico, they were writing in the newspaper, you're closing the agency. She's closing the agency, and this New York Times, I'll never forget. I think Wisconsin's wrote it, in fact. I think saying what was it going to be like, and I just resented that she had written that, because then it sounded like I was welching on the bet, so to speak, And I thought, well, come on, it's going to be fine. What do you mean? Because the indication was that I had done so much to keep things rolling so nicely along. And I thought,
in terms of diversity.
Yeah, because I would speak up to designers, I'd speak up to magazines, brides magazines, who just never thought anybody black got married. I just used to have to ask them, don't you? And since I had a white model agency, it was very easy for me to see the difference, because like Catherine, this one girl I represent was a beautiful commercial brown-haired girl, white girl. And I would watch what her rate would be, and I'd watch what the black rate would be. And that was so different. And they would explain, when you get into the inner sanctum, that where the advertising would go into, say, Baltimore or wherever they thought, it wouldn't deem to be as valuable financially, because you don't know if they just didn't want to pay. They put the signs up, but they're not paying much for it. Mm-hmm. So anybody who's on it is not getting paid as much as Catherine, who's the white girl, who's doing pretty much. So having this white model agency with a few blacks and a few Latins and a few Asians was wonderful. Because yes, of course, the diversity part of my agency grew as I try to keep a little bit of it, so it can stay diverse, because I needed to compete with my white counterpart.
Right.
It was no sense of having a black model agency because no one would ever hear me. I had to fight fire with fire, or be as good as, and I had already had Click, and I knew I was going, and I'd started with this Paris agency who wanted me to start, so I went ahead and did this. It was very different for me to do this when I had the model agency, because I just would talk to people. I could say easily to Calvin or Perry or whoever would call, and Donna, no foolish girl, and say, listen, I'm sorry I said that. But I don't care who you tell. Because they were really foolish, because they would always say to me, well, we use Naomi. Oh, see, Calvin and Perry wouldn't play that. They didn't do that. But she really pissed me off, because I knew she was so cool. Why did she do that? Why is she, she wouldn't. So these are the things you would do in the model agency. And you could have some talk to them, you could say things, and that where it seemed like I had, this was my lifetime thing, which really wasn't. It wasn't my lifetime, but it was something I was able to do because I had the agency. So when they'd say, I want you to find me a great black girl, and they were having 35 white girls, if I asked them, well, how many models do you have? And they said 35. And you want me to find you this great black girl? And they say, yeah. And they'd be so excited because they asked me, and they want me to be excited as they are. And I said, but doesn't that sound a little racist in a way? No, what are you saying? And then you help them to see it. So that was what was great about being in my position. But then when I left the industry, and I started getting calls, and I left in '96. So Kim Heistrada from Paper told me that the reason things were beginning to change is because they don't have that voice anymore. Mm-hmm. So that was where it began to change. And then Naomi started calling me and saying, you have to come back, you have to do something. The black girls disappearing, that was by '98. The coalition Black Girls Coalition had done something in '96 to talk about the advertising industry to reflect their consumer. So they had that nice, good force at the end. But then as it went on, it started to really disappear. And they found this girl, Alec Weck, and they used her all the time, and they just thought that was enough. And then we started having casting directors, and then casting directors started going into Eastern Europe. Then all of a sudden they had scouts. All the industry started to change. The model industry was no longer simply what it was. So now we have all these other players who doesn't really care about our history, doesn't care about America and our history.
And you had also mentioned that some of the designers who have passed on, and there are other designers in there running those running those companies.
And I can name him too.
You can, it's all right. Name them. You did name them, so you can name them again.
Yes, I did. I did that at the New York Times.
But that they didn't understand the history of the designer
before them.
Like
Paco Rabanne. No one knows that Paco, and I want to tell you, keep this for your information. Paco Rabanne was a designer who loved girls of color in his clothes. So when he first was starting out, he used the girls of color. Well, the editors didn't like that. They didn't want him using. They started to not want to write about him. One editor spit in his face. I mean, he didn't care. He saw what looked good for his clothes. And so his family started begging him to please, because you're losing business. So when you see these other kids come along and they don't have a clue who Paco Rabanne was, or Givenchy, you know what I mean? Or people who really, really made a difference. Even Calvin. I mean, when Francesco came along, I don't know who he think he was with his Brazilian self talking about, my mother has workers in her that are black in Brazil, that, I'm not, my casting director is half black. Well, the white part of her ain't listening because we got a problem. And this was really not nice. So we gave him a discomfortable moment, and really, we called him out.
And they called out, you said that there was a writer, I think, was it at the Times?
Yeah.
Who looked at all of the shows.
And the things that we were talking about.
What she was talking about, that there were either one or no models of color on the runways, and they went through 100 shows and there were hardly any.
Yeah.
And then Bethann started having these conversations?
Yeah, the conversation started like in 2007 when the casting directors, who I don't know even how they even got the jobs, but they did, because the agency, designers started thinking they needed them, and they allowed them to come in, and then all of a sudden, when things like that happen, and there's too many people in the kitchen, then all of a sudden the fashion model is no longer a muse. So because it's like there's somebody got in the bed between the husband and the wife in a way that it just separated things. So the casting directors are doing things and telling the stylists are telling the designers what to do. So it changed things greatly. And I think it hurt our industry greatly in that way. And
you stood up and got other folks to begin talking about it.
Yeah, well, we had it like an innocent, we still do. We have this thing that we named the Diversity Coalition. But there's like, it's like a speakeasy. Like there's a whole bunch of people, black and white, models, agents, casting directors, 2 casting directors who care about these things. And they are the people who tell me what's happening when they go to Europe and everything like that, and then we get on the phone, we have an international call, and we talk about things. And then I decided, when I was in Mexico once, I just had to write a letter, because I had done everything. We had done everything, and it got good one time, and it got quiet when the casting directors were saying, no blacks, no ethnics. That was 2007. After we exposed all that, yes, then they stopped saying that. And then Franco Cesani came out with the Black Issue. That was great, 2008. And so there are a lot of great things that were happening, and then it just got quiet again. And so we had to really make something happen. So from 2010 to 2013, that's when I saw that it was getting ready. If you take your foot off, I always say, if you take your foot off the clutch, the car just won't go. And so I had to I wrote something, and I called up 2 of the members of the coalition of members, and whatever so to speak. And then they said, wow, both of them individually said, it's to the point. And it just said the right thing. And then I went and we sent it to was it Paris, London, Milan, and New York, which is what do you call it?
Like CFDA,
CFDA.
Each of those.
Yeah.
Which are the organizations of fashion designers in each
couldn't get it
place.
At the moment. Yeah.
And we want to get to Q&A, so I want you to finish the story so they can know what happened.
And so when we sent that out, they wanted to know, I sent it to Women's Wear Daily to use them as a person that basically is our Bible of our industry, and they wanted to know who wrote the letter. And I was trying to act like I don't know. They said, well, Bethann, we can't publish it if somebody doesn't stand up. I said, okay, I wrote it, which I did. I was trying to make it really and then they went and I had sent it to each one of those places, and then I had named all the designers that were guilty of using one model of color or not consistently for 2 to 3 seasons, whether it's their intention or not. It's racism, and it affected everything. I mean, the guy at the New York Times had ran the article, July right before, and I mean, it had such a great effect to watch. Like Celine, who I love Phoebe, but she just never used anyone of color, any color. It was just all white girls. She changed that because if that letter went out to September 2007, 2013. In Paris and Italy, things shifted because nobody wants to think that they're racist.
That's when the media can work.
Well, if you do, and you do it in such a way that it really is the truth, and you're really telling the truth. You're not making things up, and that's why I want to bring something up. That's why I want to say, I know you have to do a Q&A, but something had happened. This is where it gets really difficult for me, and I know I have said that I just recently said to my girlfriend Sophia that I have accepted. I never ever thought I was a feminist, because I didn't think it applied to me being a woman of color. When I watched my mother, she would have loved for her to stay home, and she would love for her man to make more money than her. We were not trying to, equal up nothing. So we couldn't even find my father. I mean, my father we could find, but I'm saying there are men who you just go to get milk and they never come home. All the things that would happen. So it becomes a very sad thing when I thought to myself, at this stage, something happened in my industry, and some of you might know about this, and I want to say, you say when the media can do good, but right now the media is hungry for content, and that's a very dangerous thing. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's dangerous is that we, the people, believe what we read. That's a very dangerous thing. So what happened in my industry that I want to speak on, because I owe it. There's 2 girls in Russia, and I think some of you might know the story, who are in fashion, who really work within that.
And this is talking about today.
Yeah, this happened just a month or so ago. And what happened is that these 2 girls who are Russian went to a Kanye West concert. You know the song Niggas in Paris? Okay. So they go happily, and Kanye's up there, and he tells all of them as he's singing, this is the first time all you white people can say nigga. So go ahead. And they're singing, they're happy, it's a concert. The next day, the designers, 2 girls, one is a designer, the other one is a blogger, and she's kind of known. The designer wrote her friend a note, sent her flowers thanking her for such a wonderful evening, and wrote on the card, to all my niggas in Paris. The friend that received it posted it on the internet. Yeah, see? Now you wouldn't be her friend no more, right? Right. This girl, these 2 people now have gotten enthralled with being called racist, their families are being threatened, everything is happening. It's an unfortunate situation. When these things happen right away, what happens is that they start explaining. The explanation oftentimes is worse than the crime. Yep. Because they start saying all the wrong things like, my cousin is black, or I don't know. In Russia. I mean, they say, we didn't mean it. Okay. This is a terrible thing. And I just wanted to say, because I know the situation, and look, I'm one of these kind of girls from Bethann. I say nigga every 27 minutes. I know you're not supposed to, y'all are not supposed to. I'm never going to be told I can't say it because it makes me feel good.
Okay, I got to go back. I just want to make sure that we wind up the point that Bethann did all of that work to bring awareness to what was happening in the model on the runways leading up through 2013. And the CFDA, how we started, awarded her for work that really made them uncomfortable.
Yes.
But made a difference.
That's right.
And that was courageous.
That was courageous.
That was courageous on your part and strategic. I remember all the things that you did, and we are grateful that you did it.
And I'm grateful that you say that, but I want to say it wasn't, well, it is courageous for someone on the outside of looking in. For me, it wasn't courageous because it's my industry, and I basically know that I do think I know the animal. I just know that it's not a racist thing, it's an ignorant thing.
There you go.
And I approach it in that way. And as I said to another editor who was asking me, do you think you can make a difference? I've done it before. I've seen you can educate someone about something they're doing. This other thing that's happening now where you
I gotta stop.
Okay, we gotta stop.
Novella says, come on, Novella, come on. We're just transitioning so that there can be more interaction other than just the 2 of us, which I know we'd like to have a few questions. Is that all right, Bethann?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I was looking at Kadeem.
Yeah, I don't know if they can hear you, but you can head to the mics at the back of the room if you have a question.
Make sure it's a question.
Say it one more time.
Make sure it's a question. Make sure it's a question.
And yes, so let me say this. We have rules. We have rules. A question, not a statement. It needs to be quick. Thank you. And so where are we going first? Here? Okay. Yes.
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 About him giving me... About I introduced, Willie wanted to meet Jean-Michel Basquiat. I knew Jean-Michel very well. Willie's a big art collector and supporter of the arts. I took him down to Jean-Michel's, took him down to his studio. Jean-Michel loves somebody coming because that means he's going to make some sales, and Willie really wanted to buy a lot. I think he must have bought 6 pieces of art. There was one little black and white painting I really wish that I could get, but I didn't want to ask them because they were making a nice bond. So then what happened is that I hope that maybe they might think of me, and because I was making this big hookup, and that they might, give me this painting. And then, but anyway, nobody said anything. I get a phone call from Jean-Michel, and Jean-Michel said, "I want to come by. I have something for you." I said, yes. I got the, and he comes by, and he comes to my house. He brings me about this much of marijuana. It was the biggest bag of marijuana I have ever seen. And I said to him, Jean-Michel, well, Jesus Christ, this will take me a lifetime. And he said, then we're good.
Good evening. Queen Mother, Bethann Hardison.
Oh, thank you.
With all of these lives that you've led, what gets you up every day?
Oh, what inspires me to do?
What gets you up every day?
Oh, thank goodness I just wake up. No, I mean that's, I just wake up. I'm just happy, and I don't complain about any weather. I'm just happy that I wake up. I don't complain about the rain, the heat, the snow. I just think as long as I wake up, it's a beautiful thing.
Right.
And I really don't have any aspirations other than I have a lot of ideas, but no, I just work on compassion.
That's good. Yeah.
This was a wonderful conversation and great evening. I'm so blessed that you guys are here at the Schomburg.
Thank you.
Number two, I have a question in regards to opening up a consulting / referral modeling agency. What advice would you give to someone like me who wants to possibly open up a consulting agency, and mainly for people of color?
Don't do it. Don't even lose your time. If you want to do something, I know sometimes people think it looks all wonderful and you can do something with it. You have to see first before you do it. I'm going to say don't do it at the end. But before that, I encourage you to make a business plan and basically go out there and see where is a market that could use it, and will you be making any money from it? Mm-hmm. Because it's very difficult to say that you're going to consult, because once it's like being a publicist, they always think they did it themselves and they don't want to pay you. Mm. So you have to be thoughtful about how. And it looks good, it sounds good, but I'd go into something that could really make you, broaden your shoulders, make you stronger, and make you a living.
Exactly. Well, what?
I'm sorry, but we got to keep going. Yep. Quickly, we have time for very, very quick text.
Hello, Queen Mothers. And this is the greatest night I had. I had another Queen Mother I ran into that used to work with Mother Hale and Queen Mother Wyatt, 92. I just wanted to say that...
Question?
About...
No.
Oxygen. Oxygen.
It's a good one.
God, if nobody don't believe in God, this is oxygen.
All right.
All
right. All right. Next.
Hi. Thank you so much for making this evening available for all of us. My question is this. My niece just finished an MBA degree in Paris from a business school in luxury brands. Oh, she's obviously a woman of color. She looks like me. She's having a hard time finding a job.
Yeah.
She's so passionate about fashion. She loves it. She's been to Barney. She's been to Bergdorf. They offer her sales jobs. But then she goes to interview for them. But then they don't offer her the job because they read her resume. She has an MBA and a master's. And they said, well, do you really want to do sales? She's like, I want a foot in the door. And then she doesn't get the job. So looking for any advice.
Yeah, no, it's really, there's a guy in our lives who's in the retail business. That's something I recently said I would like to to take on a bit. There is something.
Do you need an assistant?
I beg your pardon?
Do you need an
Do you
assistant?
do you
No,
need
I
an
say,
assistant?
listen, I talk a lot of shit. I mean, I say things and I mean it,
It's free
but
thinking.
then
It's free thinking.
I'm on
I
another
understand.
plane going
Okay.
somewhere else.
It's
But I
free
want to say
thinking.
something to you. I do want to do this. This is something I recently said. I feel very guilty about being able to do something about a group of people like the models, and they're having some success. They're working. There's a lot of girls come along.
Sure,
Edward and I says a
sure.
lot. But what I have a problem with is what's going on in retail. There's no executives in retail. There's no executives.
All right, we have time
Thank
for
you.
2 quick questions next.
Hi, how are you? I'm Darlene Lewis. I want to ask you, do you think that because the music industry has opened up a better world for fashion, that more people should be more independent as opposed to always trying to work for others?
Wow. Okay.
Well, I'm going to say something that Bethann says a lot, which is you need to learn within the industry before you break out to go on your own. That is something that has been true for me in my career. We've talked about this recently. Millennials in particular, are very entrepreneurial, which is a great thing, but you do need to learn about the industry before you break out on your own, because you learn through those who know,
Right.
and then you make your own.
Is that what you were saying?
Well, I've just been independent for 30 years, and I just don't understand, why with everything that we have today, that more fashion designers and more manufacturers of color are just not, picking
It's
up
very
the phone,
expensive.
investing their money. Yeah, but you know what? You have to take a risk.
All right, next.
We'll take
Right
this
here,
final
one more.
question.
Hi, Harriette. Hi, Mama. It's Nicole. My question is, you mentioned earlier in your talk that you have to keep your foot on the clutch in order to move forward. I wanted to ask you, what motivates you to keep your foot on that clutch? And secondly, how do you keep from burning out that engine if you always have your foot on the clutch?
Well, the reason, that's a very good one. Thank you very much, Nicole. What it is that when it's like a calling. It's not something I desire to do. It's something that's a calling. It's like when people say, well, I don't want to get into that, but when it's like something that you're called to do, so you do it so naturally, you do it organically, you do it like it, you do it well enough that it doesn't seem to offend the others. But there are times you do back off. I have done that where I've taken my foot off the clutch, and I always say one of my well-known quotes is that an activist has to remain active. That's the only way to succeed. And when you step back sometimes, you watch it all go down. Then I had to get back involved. But it takes a lot of energy to do it.
I want to add, because I know this about you, Bethann takes care of herself. She takes care of her body and her mind. You take breaks and go to beautiful places to replenish. And we didn't even talk about your amazing son, Kadeem Hardison. This is, so let us just say, because we are transitioning to next, there are 1,000 things I could say about Bethann, but really what I know about you and what I've known from day one is that you have a full life that includes taking care of your spirit, taking care of your physical body, and putting yourself in places where you can replenish and always giving to others. That's what my family, every member of my family taught us. That's the cycle of life that makes it worth living. This can never just be one moment in a conversation, so we'll just have to continue it. But let us thank the Schomburg for hosting us today.
Let us thank Harriette Cole and Bethann Hardison.
And let us say that we just want you to know that we are having a little reception outside after. Everybody can't ask Bethann a question because it'll be too much, but we can offer each other love. And I hope to see you at our next event.
Thank you all. So I am going to ask that we all transition to the Langston Hughes lobby. We're going to take a few pictures here. If you do have additional questions, again, let's have those conversations outside in the Langston Hughes lobby, and thank you again for joining us.
Bethann, thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. How are you?